Gators 2025 football schedule is out. We knew the Gators opponents before tonight. Now we know the order in which the Gators are going to play them. Welcome back to the All Kinds of Weather Forecast. I am your host, Neil Schulman. You can follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at All Kinds Weather. Before we go any further, please be sure to like, subscribe, comment, tell your friends, give us a 5-star rating and a nice review on Apple Podcasts. If you're listening on audio platforms, please be sure to give us a subscription and give us a comment if you're able to on that platform as well. Also, before we get into the crux of our episode, got to take a second to shout out our sponsor. The All Kinds of Weather Forecast is proudly sponsored by 401k Generation, the wealth management company that helps you invest today for your future tomorrow. Their team of advisors is committed to providing guidance and education for your 401k plan and its participants, and they also offer a range of enrollment solutions tailored to meet the unique needs of your company's 401k plan. Whether it's savings for your child's college, investment advice, or even your retirement, 401k Generation's team of advisors makes getting to know you their top priority. Their advisors will tailor a path to assist you in navigating life financial milestones and reaching your financial goals. That's 401k Generation, building stronger futures, one generation at a time. For more information, please contact them at 866-998-5879 or visit their website, 401kgeneration.com. Also have to shout out Heads and Tails, our merch partner. You can see here, this is a very comfortable hat. It is your one-stop shop for everything Florida Gators related. Use code IAKOW30 to get 30% off your order in-store or online. They are Tampa-based, but they ship anywhere in the country, and that code is good through the end of 2024. So go ahead, last chance, get your holiday shopping in right now at theheadsandtails.com and get yourself some gear for the new year. Okay, the Florida Gators have their 2025 schedule unveiled. Won't waste any more time. We'll get right into it. Starts on August 30th against Long Island. The Gators will be getting a home game to start the 25 season. I believe this one's a bit easier than the last one was when they hosted the Miami Hurricanes, but Long Island, of course, a last-second slide in on the schedule in replacement of Florida A&M. Gators replacing FAMU with the Long Island Sharks to begin the season on August 30th. The very next week, week 2, September the 6th, Florida again plays host, this time to the South Florida Bulls. Gators got a little more than they bargained for the last time they played South Florida. Billy Napier's third game ever, actually. Florida needing a last-second field goal attempt hold to be botched at the very, very last second to survive against them. They won that 31-28. Year before that, Florida blasted South Florida 42-20 in Tampa. This game on September the 6th concludes the Gators' 3-game set against South Florida. And here's where it starts to get tricky. Here's where it gets strange, for lack of a better way to put this. This is going to be some uncharted territory as the Gators in the third week of the season on September the 13th go to LSU. That is a very, very early time for Florida and LSU to be playing football. Of course, the Gators usually play LSU in October. They have occasionally played in November. Looking through the list of games that Florida and LSU have played, this is the earliest that the Gators and the LSU Tigers will have met since 1984. The 31st matchup that Florida and LSU faced, and that one in Gainesville was a tie. The Gators also faced LSU on September 25th of 1937. This is the third time in the history of the rivalry that the Gators and LSU will be facing off in the month of September. Of course, we know Death Valley gets loud. It gets rocking in that place. Even when LSU's not good, if it's a game that LSU wants to win, that place gets really, really loud. That is not something you can say about the home stadium of the next team the Gators play, although we can't really make fun of them too much because they just walloped us. But the Gators go travel to the Miami Hurricanes on the 20th of September. This is game 4 for Florida, going for a revenge game against the Canes. Miami smacked Florida around last time they faced. Florida will certainly be looking for revenge, you would think. You would think that would matter something to Florida going down, and what could be a very, very difficult loss on the 13th. You know, LSU is going to want that get back game against Florida. You think the Gators are going to have to get up for both of those games on the road in successive weeks. It's not the only time that Florida will be playing back-to-back road games this season, so keep that in mind. But Florida starting off with Long Island and then South Florida and then hitting the road for 2 games in a row against LSU and Miami. Florida does then get a bye on September 27th before coming back home to face Texas. The Longhorns come to Gainesville, Florida for, I mean, I guess what we thought was a marquee matchup, it didn't really turn out to be that because Florida got rocked. They didn't have a lot of their players, to be completely fair, but when you get two blue blood programs like a Florida, like a Texas facing off against each other, it's always a big deal. You kind of had Georgia and Texas feeling that way when they played each other. Georgia, of course, won that game in the regular season and the rematch in Atlanta. Texas has only come to Florida one time before. That was in 1940. Texas won that, and Florida actually has never beaten Texas. The Gators' best result against the Longhorns was a tie in 1924. So Florida really looking to get on the scoreboard against the Longhorns then. We're going to keep it Texas related, Lone Star State. Lone Star State theme here. Gators go to Aggie Land the very next year. And if you're thinking, oh, we've seen enough of that place, well, you're not wrong. Frankly, Florida's been there quite a few times in the last few seasons. Florida actually getting them in the Aggies' first season in the SEC in 2012. Florida going back there in 2020 and 2022, and now going back there again in 2025. Something of a nice little rivalry, actually. Florida and Texas A&M facing 7 times all time, 5 of them coming since the Aggies joined the SEC in 2012. Both those cases, Texas A&M leads Florida all time by 1. It is 3-2 Aggies since they joined the SEC. It is 4-3 Aggies all time. So Florida could really use a win like that, especially with what we're going to talk about coming up in a moment, would be a really nice pickup for Florida to be able to go and steal one on the road this year. The next game Florida plays is going to be a much easier one, you think. Mississippi State coming to the Swamp. Florida leads that all-time series by a country mile, 34-19 all-time for the Gators. Florida not even really playing that well and still beating Mississippi State by 3 scores when they went to Starkville earlier this year. That's one of those games where it could go one of two ways. If Florida's season goes sideways early, like let's say they lose to LSU and to Miami, and then they split the Texas A&M games, if you then lose to Mississippi State, that could be the guillotine drop for Billy Napier. On the other hand, though, if Florida's season is off to a very good start, let's say they split LSU and Miami and they're 3-1 after the first 4, and then they beat Texas to go 5-1, and then let's say they lose to Texas A&M to become 5-2, then the Gators could get that get right game and get themselves to 6-2 with a brutal stretch coming up ahead. Gators do have a bye after Mississippi State, and then they go to Jacksonville for the last time for a while. It'll come back to Jacksonville, but for now, it's the last time Florida and Georgia will play in Jacksonville, with the game next year going to be in, or I should say in 26. We're still in 2024, but with the 2026 game going to be in Atlanta and the 2027 game going to be in Tampa, we will temporarily say goodbye to Jacksonville for this game with one more time. Florida, Georgia, Jacksonville, you got to think the Gators at the very least have a much better chance to win the game in 2024 if DJ Lagway does not hurt his hamstring. He did. It was what it was. Georgia wound up winning the game in Jacksonville for the 4th straight time. That's their first 4-game winning streak in more than 40 years. So Gators going to try to make sure that stops right there before they hit the road for another pair of back-to-back road games, the first of which is against the Kentucky Wildcats. Florida, as we know, had lost 3 straight to Kentucky before entering this season. Gators put a stop to that streak with an emphatic 48-20 beatdown to the Cats in the Swamp under the lights. We all loved watching that game, looking to see if Florida can sort of build a bit of a streak going back the other way after winning 31 in a row from 87 to 2017. Kentucky a game Florida should win. There's never an excuse to lose to Kentucky back-to-back times. The Gators got walloped by Kentucky the last time they went to Lexington, Kentucky. Gators should be expected to win that game unless things really go in, shall we say, unforeseen directions for both teams after watching what we watched from Kentucky this year. The second of these back-to-back games and the final road game for Florida in 2025. Ole Miss, they are going to be looking for some blood after Florida essentially knocked them out of the college football playoff with their 24-17 win in the Swamp this year, keeping with the theme of facing the Mississippi Rebels late in the season. Florida going to Ole Miss on November the 15th. The Grove should be a lot of fun. I'm planning to go to that game as far in advance as we are right now, but that's the game that if you're looking for a road game to go to, it's probably that one. Unless if you live in Miami, if you're one of those South Florida Gators, all right, you're probably going to go to the Florida at Miami game. But as far as true road games go outside the state of Florida, this is one that you should be eyeballing because the atmosphere there, the overall pageantry of Oxford, Mississippi. So everybody says, I've never been, but so they say, this is something special. Definitely look forward to going to Oxford. And then the Gators wrap up their season with not one, but two rivalry games in the Swamp in back-to-back weeks. The first of which I hate to call this team an hors d'oeuvre, a warm-up, but Tennessee is the hors d'oeuvre because FSU comes to the Swamp as we knew they would to finish the year because that's how it always is. And that's the one part of the schedule that we are going to keep tradition with, aside from keeping Georgia and Jacksonville for one more year. But oh my, what a pair of games to end the 2025 regular season. Tennessee coming to Gainesville, Florida on November 22nd. Of course, we all know there was the game after 9/11 in 2001 where Tennessee beat Florida in the Swamp, and a game that personally I remember well. It was a rough night for Florida Gator fans for sure. But there was that game. There was also the COVID game of 2020. Aside from that, this is the latest that Florida will be playing Tennessee since the 1969 Gator Bowl. There's a bit of a crazy story involved in that game. The super softs of Florida's offense. You got Carlos Alvarez and John Reeves tearing things up for the Gators. You've got the Ray Graves story. You got the Doug Dickey story, the coach of Tennessee on that night. Of course, Dickey also coaching the Florida Gators for a decade as well. So a wild story there. But aside from the COVID year of 2020 and the September 11th pushback season of 2001, this is the latest that Florida and Tennessee will have been facing each other since 1969. It is the latest regular season meeting since 1932 when the teams met in Jacksonville before the SEC was even a thing. The Gators and Tennessee Vols met in Jacksonville, actually back-to-back, or it's not back-to-back years, but 2 out of 3 years, the Gators and Vols met in December in 1930 and 1932. So, and then Florida FSU to wrap it all up. The Gators and Noles, the rivalry game. Of course, that's going to be the one to end the year. We're going to at least keep that much of the schedule intact to call it a year. You think FSU is going to have to be better than they were a year ago? That they have to be better. There's no physically possible way that FSU can be this bad 2 years in a row. You'd have to think. So that is the Gators schedule. Long Island, South Florida, at LSU, at Miami, by Texas, at Texas A&M, Mississippi State, by Georgia and Jacksonville, at Kentucky, at Mississippi, Tennessee, and FSU. That's a wild schedule. That is a wild schedule. For one thing, facing LSU in Baton Rouge on the third week of the season is crazy. And then having the back-to-back with at LSU and at Miami. And then you have another pair of back-to-back road games at Power Five teams, at Kentucky and at Ole Miss on the back end of the schedule in November. Of course, facing Tennessee the second to last week of the season is wild. That's, again, the latest they faced with normal circumstances since 1969. The coronavirus pandemic of 2020, not normal. The 2001 season, because of the September 11th attacks, obviously not normal. That pushed that game to the end of the year. None of that normal. This is the latest that Florida and Tennessee will be scheduled to face in a normal regular season game since 1969. Crazy to think about. And that is before Florida faces against FSU. No cupcakes at the end of the season for Florida this time around. There weren't really any this year at the end of the season. I mean, I guess you could say Central Florida was a cupcake. They were really, really bad. But even that was in October. This time, Florida's two non-Power Five, non-conference opponents, Long Island and South Florida, back to back to start the season, and then nothing. And Mississippi State is a pretty bad team. Florida should be able to handle them, but no cupcakes in terms of teams that recruit from very, very different pools of talent than the Florida Gators after those first 2 weeks of the season. Again, Long Island, South Florida, at LSU, at Miami, Texas, at Texas A&M, Mississippi State, Georgia, at Kentucky, at Mississippi, Tennessee, FSU. Those last 10 games are brutal. There's no soft landing spot in there other than maybe Mississippi State. And again, that's going to be year two. We saw them in game 4 of year 1 of Jeff Lebby's time there. We have no idea what Mississippi State will or will not be by the midway point of year 2 of the Jeff Lebby era. So a lot of fun matchups here. You got to think the Gators are going to be favored, obviously, in the first two. It goes without saying, Long Island and South Florida. They could very well be underdogs in their next 4 at LSU, at Miami, Texas, and at A&M. They should be favored against Mississippi State. They could very well be underdogs against their net. Well, no, they won't be underdogs at Kentucky, I don't think. But they could very well be underdogs in 3 of their next 4 against Georgia and Jacksonville. They should be favored at Kentucky, but then at Ole Miss, and then who knows what Tennessee or even FSU will be in the swamp. At that point in the season, you kind of just have to wait and see what you get from them on the field before making a prediction. There's so much data that we don't know on the field between those teams in Florida and Tennessee or FSU. Kind of hard to think about a line there. But again, we knew the schedule was going to be difficult for Florida. We knew the opponents. We just didn't know the order of them. Now we've got that. So we've got more content coming on the all kinds of weather forecasts. We're going to talk about the madness that is the transfer portal for the Florida Gators. We'll talk a little bit about the Gators bowl game against Tulane. Tulane doesn't really have much of a team left after Darius Mensah and, I mean, their backup quarterback even hit the transfer portal. Mensah going to Duke. Gators are going to have most of their team for this game. The Gators are a whopping 13.5-point favorite as of this recording. So Florida is going to be looking for an 8-5 finish. We talked about in the offseason, Florida needs to go 7-5. They did that. But before we go any further, before we call it a show, before we go into any other topics, I've been talking about this with Florida Gator fans on Twitter for the best part of the last month or so about how I owe Billy Napier an apology. And what better way to end the show than with this? I said in the offseason that Billy Napier needed to go 7-5 for me to even believe that there was an argument for him to come back for 2025, for if there even to even be a conversation about him coming back. I said 6-6. I don't care what happens. I don't want to hear any sob stories about the apocalypse befalling this Gator football team. 6-6 is not good enough. I don't want to hear any excuses or about injuries or about if this or if that or if whatever happened. No, I don't want to hear it. 7-5 is the minimum that I need to believe that this guy deserves to even show his face in Gainesville for a 4th season. Well, I was premature. I was early. So I talked about how if Florida were to reach that 7-5 point, I would apologize to Billy Napier. Well, here we are. Billy, I jumped the gun. I was too early. I'm not going to say that I was outright wrong. I will not say that. I don't think that's true. I don't think it's true. I think that the record that Billy Napier put up through the first 34 games of 15 and 19 was appalling. That was by far the worst record any Gator coach had ever put out since the 1940s. What I'm apologizing for is I jumped the gun. Dustin, the editor, our graphics guy, he's more than an editor. He's way more than an editor. Dustin, if we can put that tweet up, I'll read it exactly so that there's no miscommunications as to exactly what I said. I'm reading it. I said before the season I needed to see 7-5 to believe Billy Napier deserved another season. He's one win away against a horrible FSU team from doing that. Assuming he does it, I will do a full show apologizing to Billy Napier and admitting I jumped the gun. Fair is fair. Okay, well, I've already kind of broken from that by not making this a full show. I'm including it as part of the schedule show. But okay, admitting I jumped the gun. That's what I'm here to apologize for. Billy, I was too early. I jumped the gun. You have earned the right to go out and prove me wrong with subsequent data points in 2025. Because, frankly, for all the criticism that I heap on you, Billy, the way you kept this team together was magnificent. That was very impressive. It would have been so easy for this team to have just quit, to shut down the operation. I thought that they were going to do that after the Texas A&M game. I thought that he's cooked. There's no way. There's nothing good that's going to come from this guy continuing to coach the team. We need an interim coach. We need something other than Billy Napier's leadership. This is so gone. This is so done. Billy Napier, you proved me wrong in that aspect. You were given another year by Scott Strickland. I would say that you have earned it. You have proven that you deserve this extra season to coach the Florida Gators. And for me, I was too early in saying that you did not. I was wrong to do that. I will eat that crow. I was premature on that. And Billy, I like you. I want you to be the Gators coach for a very long time. I'm sick and tired of seeing the Gators continue to fire coaches. For those of you who go, well, do you want to keep firing coaches every 3 or 4 years? Not really. No, I don't. I don't want to do that. I was under the assumption that this was not the guy that the Gators needed to go out and produce the results that the Florida Gators deserve to be producing, that the history shows that the Florida Gators deserve to be producing. Because, we all want the Gators to win. And if this guy wasn't going to be the one to do it, then we needed someone else to do it. It was that simple. It was never an anti-bully agenda. It was, no, I want to win. I want the Florida Gators to win agenda. That was it. That was the only agenda I'd ever been pushing. But regardless, Billy Napier has proven to me that he deserves a little bit more time to go out there and definitively prove me and all of his doubters wrong. So that's where I'll leave that. Billy, you want to go out there and make the CFP in 2025? I will come out and I will admit that I was wrong for ever doubting you. And that's where I want to be. I'd rather the Gators make the CFP than be right, because guess what? It's a lot better for our clicks when the Gators are good than when they're bad. This show's been around since Dan Mullen was here. Some pretty good times in the Dan Mullen era. I know, because I can tell you, because I was here for it. This show does a lot better when the Florida Gators are winning games. I don't want to be the guy who tries to prove everyone wrong and prove that he was right. I'd rather the Gators win. I have data, I have evidence that tells me that that's better for this show. So with that said, Billy, go win the bowl game, go out next year and go continue to prove us all wrong. And I will be your biggest supporter. I will be out there saying, you know what? I was one of those who call for your head. I see the light now. I was wrong earlier. This is the guy that Florida needs to lead the program. So that's what I'd want to be doing. And you know what? That'll get a lot more clicks for those of you who say that, Neil just wants to get clicks with his negativity. No, because that'll get a lot more when I come out and I admit I was wrong. But I need more data to be able to say that. The 3-game winning streak that Florida's been on is great. It was a fantastic showing against LSU and then against Ole Miss. And then you did what you were supposed to do against FSU. That was kind of an ugly game, but you know what? You went out there, you beat your opponent by 20 points, a rivalry. You beat your rival by 20 points. That's great. Not gonna complain about that. So, Billy, keep doing what you've been doing. Let's see you continue to use this momentum in the offseason to make the moves you've got to make. And then we can talk about what we need to see for next season. But we know the schedule next season. Now we know the opponents for next season. We know what the Gators are going to have in front of them in year 4 for Billy Napier. So until then, y'all be sure to give us a 5-star rating and a nice review on Apple Podcasts. We always appreciate that. We'd love to hear what you have to say about the Gators schedule and about my somewhat mea culpa. Go ahead, comment your thoughts if you're watching or listening on a platform that allows you to do so. We always want to take your thoughts into consideration as well. And again, we'll do more shows coming up soon. Talk about the Gators bowl game. We'll talk about the Gators transfer portal madness that's going on. But until then, I've been your host, Neil Schulman. Had a lot of fun talking Gators as always. And until then, y'all, stay safe, stay healthy, and go Gators.